everyone, welcome to another exciting session by Digital Vidya. The topic for today's session is what does the shift to digital PR mean for your brand? And today we have Vedanarayan Vedantham with us for leading the session. Veda is a digital marketing visiting faculty at SB Jain Institute of Management and Research. He is a business leadership professional who has helped grow multiple global digital brands across fashion, travel, and online education. Veda has also an experience of owning and managing PLLs. He brings to the table the various mix of global experience spanning marketing, PLL management, sales hunting, farming through expanding wallet shares and business consulting. So Veda will help us grow and understand the topic more, and we'll have around 30 to 45 minutes of the presentation. If you all face any queries, you can just type in your queries in the question panel and we'll pick up your queries post the session. So over to you, Veda. Welcome.
Thanks, Divya. Hi, everyone. A very good afternoon. Is everyone able to hear me okay? I assume so. Divya, can you hear me fine?
Yes, we can.
Great. So thanks for the nice introduction, Divya. It's a pleasure being here, and thanks to everyone for sparing 1 hour of their Friday afternoon on this webinar. Today we're going to be looking at PR in the digital age. PR in a lot of aspects is the unsung hero of sorts from a digital marketing perspective, and we are here to understand how PR can actually make a difference to the brands that you manage. Before we begin, could we have a quick show of hands just for me to get a sense of the kind of audience mix we have here today? So Divya, if you could put up the first poll question.
Yes, it is live.
So if everyone could quickly fill out what roles you perform in your professional careers today. I'm assuming it's one of these many options you've put out. If it's something beyond this, you could probably just quickly chat it out for everybody to view using the chat window. Divya, let me know once the poll is complete and we can then continue with the presentation.
Sure. We have received approximately 80% of the responses. So I'm closing up the poll and sharing the results with everyone.
Nice. Great, that's good to know. Good to see that almost 1 out of 4 people are from the PR space itself. You have a few entrepreneurs here as well. I'm assuming you're curious to know how PR can make an impact to the SMBs and the startups that you manage. We have a few digital marketers here as well, and surprisingly a few young kids with us as well, some freshers, fresh out of college, fresh young minds. Great, so let's begin. Is everyone able to see my screen? Divya, able to see my screen? Able to see the first slide?
Yes, we can.
Great. So over the course of the next hour, what we'll do is we'll first try and understand what PR really is, what objectives PR can drive for the organization, for your business. We'll also try and understand what the differences are between digital PR, or new age PR and traditional PR. We'll also then look at what are the 4 key pillars of which can actually help you in building an engaging and robust PR playbook. We'll then do a 101 of sorts wherein we try and understand what are the really popular global tools which are being used, which can really help you do a good job of PR execution. We'll also look at one very small caselet of Airbnb. Airbnb has been globally recognized as one of the biggest brand and PR success stories. We'll very quickly try and understand what is it that they've actually done right from a PR perspective. Before we begin, could we again do the second poll question, Divya? If you could just quickly open up the poll question one after another to, the second poll question which I had given you. I'd just like to get the audience perspective on that question.
Can you just give out the question which you want to know? Because
the second poll question is around which of the 2 options. I've given you 2 options on which can positively influence a consumer's perception of the brand.
Yeah.
So before we begin, if you could quickly help me understand, or help the audience understand, help the rest of the people on this webinar understand, which of these 2 options you believe will do a better job of positively influencing a completely unknown brand. a brand A, for example.
We have received 60% of the votes,
Mm-hmm.
just crossing 70. So we'll wait till 80% of the people have voted and then we'll share the results.
Sure.
Here you go. So 46% have said 200-word editorial, while 54% of people have said a full-page front ad on
Mm-hmm.
TOI.
That's an interesting response because I typically in the classes I conduct, the first option gets the majority by a distance. It's surprising to know that it's almost a split verdict in this case. Uh, so PR is essentially a mechanism, a perception building mechanism through which a business can influence a target audience's perception about the brand because it's coming in, positively, obviously, because it's coming in from an unbiased third party's perspective, because it's coming in from a media portal which is considered to be unbiased and it's considered to be a third party, instead of the brand directly talking about the kind of value propositions it brings to the table. The brand strategy, the value propositions, the consumer benefits are coming in from an unbiased third party. So it's a very strong perception building vehicle in that sense. So my experience has been that from a brand perception influencing perspective, PR really works better, which is why I'm surprised at the kind of responses I got for the previous question. Because in most classes I've been, people unanimously vote for the former. For example, I consult for an edtech company today, which is a completely unknown brand, a company by the name Playbook, which is into gamified learning. And the kind of, we were able to really push the envelope on brand perception when we had a really strong editorial PR coverage, which was put out on the Economic Times. And we also experimented with some print ads very briefly. And we got some very little traction out of it because first of all, because audience doesn't consider that to be a very credible source of information because the brand is actually paid for that exposure and the brand is directly talking about itself. In PR's case, obviously, it's coming in from an unbiased third party's perspective. So the audience does consider that to be a lot more credible. And that's the case for PR, very simply put. PR can drive multiple objectives. The first objective is, as I call it, mind share, which is a more qualitative objective, which is something which you build over the medium to long term. It's not something which is readily quantifiable. It helps you push the envelope on brand awareness. It makes sure that you seed awareness if you're a brand which is just about starting up. If you're a brand which is already started up and it is probably knocking on the doors of awareness, PR helps your brand actually move on across the entire brand evolutionary life cycle, from awareness to recall to top of mind recall. Even if your brand is being recalled, PR makes sure that your brand is recalled for the right reasons. And it also helps you brand from multiple different perspectives. It helps you brand your business from a consumer perspective, from a prospective employer perspective, and from a larger stakeholder perspective. PR also gives you some short-term benefits. Obviously, it doesn't compare to the kind of short-term benefits a regular advertisement might give you, but a regular advertisement is paid for exposure, but PR is not. PR is organic exposure, which is why it's called earned media. And some targeted bursts, some really good coverages can give you short-term traffic, lead, and revenue spikes. A sustained presence across media can really help you push the baseline on several key matrices from both from a marketing and from a business perspective. There is also this secondary spillover benefit which you get, which is from an SEO perspective, which is SEO stands for search engine optimization. So what happens is that if you get regular, good, high quality digital PR exposure on some high domain authority websites, let's say I'm running a business, let's look at the example of Playablo again, an edtech company that I frequently consult for. If we were to get regular coverages on, say, the Economic Times and with backlinks back to the homepage, in Google's eyes, in Google's organic search algorithms eyes, it would assume that my website is a really credible source of providing edtech services, of providing gamified learning solutions. And what it would then do is that it would bump up my organic search rankings over a period of time. So it does have that long-term secondary objective as well, which is positively influencing organic search rankings. Moving on, let's quickly understand the differences between traditional and digital PR. The differences between traditional and digital PR are very similar to the differences between inbound marketing and traditional marketing. Inbound marketing offers a marketer, a digital marketer, quite a lot of advantages. It gives the marketer a lot more flexibility, real-time tracking of results. The marketer has the option to tweak any aspect of the marketing mix in real time. It is highly targeted. A lot of targeting options, rich targeting options are available at the disposal of the marketer. It is again pull-based marketing and not push. So it is contextual. And digital PR offers all of those advantages. So digital PR is not one way, unlike traditional PR. It helps you track in real time what kind of responses your PR coverages are generating. There is a very strong handshake with social media, with search engine optimization. I'll also take you through some tools which actually help you manage all of this, the entire PR story life cycle in a very scientific, structured manner. Moving on, before we actually look at the building blocks of putting out a PR playbook or a PR strategy, one thing which you need to understand is where does PR actually fit in your organization's food chain? Across a lot of companies which I've worked for before, PR usually becomes an afterthought. Typically, when a new initiative is being planned, the marketing teams, the merchandising teams, the category teams, they get together, the business teams, they get together, sales teams, and they talk about pricing, promotion, the marketing channel mix, and so on and so forth. And PR is usually relegated to an afterthought. In a lot of cases, the PR person is not even involved in a lot of the discussions which happen up front. And as a result, the PR story again becomes fairly weak. This is contradictory to the kind of thought process which Amazon follows, and this is being championed by the great Jeff Bezos, wherein they actually, any new initiative which Amazon embarks upon begins with their dream PR story being crafted first. And then the teams then work backwards of that story and try to reverse engineer the nuts and bolts and the elements which need to go into that initiative or go into that product. And which is a very counterintuitive way of looking at things, but that's something which has worked well for Amazon. And that's something which even Brad Stevens, who is the former vice president of marketing at Starbucks, espouses. Moving on, so that's the first thing you need to understand before you even embark on a PR playbook. You've got to understand where does PR fit in your organization's food chain, number one. Number two, you need to have a strong foundational understanding of your organization's business objectives. That's something which is very important. Different people might think that they have a very strong understanding of their company's objectives, but this is a quick checklist which helps you gauge where you stand in terms of your levels of understanding of your company's objectives. So you need to have a strong handle on obviously the business model of the company, the status quo of the company. A lot of the business matrices, you need to have it in your fingertips. You also need to have a strong sense of the vision of the company. That's from the company's perspective. From a larger ecosystem or from a category perspective, we need to have an understanding of what are my key drivers for my category today. If you're an edtech, for example, what are the key drivers for edtech? If you're in gamified learning, for example, which is the space in which the startup I consult for operates, what are the key drivers for gamified learning? That's something you need to have a strong handle on. And what are the winds of change which are actually going to change things for my category? That's something which is very important. And the third perspective which you need to also understand is you need to have a very strong understanding of your consumer persona. What are the key motivations? What are the key pain points which your consumer is facing today? That's something on which you need to have a strong understanding of. And the last piece of the entire jigsaw puzzle when it comes to having a strong understanding of your company's business objectives is to have a strong handle on your competitive landscape. You need to know what is it that competitors are doing, what is it that they're doing well, what is it that they're doing badly. Moving on, now let's try and understand what I believe are the four really strong pillars of an engaging, robust PR playbook. These are the four pillars. The first pillar is about mapping the various PR objectives which you have with the various target stakeholders whom you're looking to target your objectives for. And this is not a horses for courses kind of a pillar. You have custom players here basis the point in the entire evolutionary life cycle your organization is in. The second pillar is about one specific target stakeholder, which is your media. And that is the single most important target stakeholder which we're talking about from a PR perspective. We're talking about how exactly you go about building a really strong relationship with media. The third pillar is something which is again pretty unique to PR and it is counterintuitive to a lot of popular schools of thought, wherein you're actually asking people to put the cart before the horse. You're actually thinking of putting the ends before the actual means. And the last PR talks about the confluence of the holy triumvirate of sorts, which is about digital PR, social, and search. Let's begin by looking at pillar one for an organization which is the awareness or pre-awareness phase, which is just about starting up. So the boxes in blue talk about the objectives which the organization is shooting for, and the boxes in green talk about your target stakeholders. And you've got four primary objectives for an organization which is pre-awareness. So in startup jargon, this would be a company which is probably seed funded or angel funded or possibly bootstrapped. There are four key objectives which a company at this stage has to solve for. One is obviously building category awareness. This is again something which a lot of people don't get. Again, if I were to take the same example of the company for which I consult for today, which is into gamified learning, before I even talk about my brand to the media or to the larger ecosystem, there is a certain education or a literacy initiative which I need to embark upon, wherein I educate the larger ecosystem on what this newfangled term of gamified learning actually is. So I need to, so to speak, build category awareness. So if I'm residing in a particular category, people first need to understand, before they even begin to understand my brand, they need to understand the space in which I'm operating in. So which is why building category awareness is of paramount importance. For example, if you had to go back 10 years, Flipkart had to build a lot of category awareness for e-commerce, something they don't have to do now, but they had to do that 10 years ago. That becomes very important, especially if you're operating in a greenfield space, a category in which there is no other player and you're the first mover. The other objective is obviously articulating the kind of consumer benefits which you bring to the table, the kind of brand value propositions which you have, and the last aspect is about building brand awareness. So there is a lot of overlap between all of these things. Apart from articulating customer benefits, which is something which is relevant for the target customers, all of the other objectives are something which are relevant for all of the three stakeholder buckets which you see. One is the larger ecosystem of stakeholders, which is your prospective investors, investees, media partners. The government is a very strong stakeholder as well. I have not mentioned that here because this is a company which is in the pre-awareness phase, so it's not really relevant. But as the company continues to grow, the government and the regulatory bodies also become some very important stakeholders in the whole mix. Prospective employees, again, are a very important stakeholder in the whole mix. Any person who's been in a startup, any entrepreneur will tell you that one of the biggest challenges any company faces as it continues to grow and scale is to attract the right talent, the right kind of talent. And one of the best channels for influencing people's opinions in terms of your company as a prospective place to work, as a prospective employer, is PR. Some really strong PR stories about the category, aspirational brand stories do wonders in terms of prospective employee branding and encourage them to actually invest their life and time in your organization, in your startup. And obviously target customers are a target audience which you're talking about. Moving on further, I was actually heading marketing back at Stazilla, and Stazilla has been in the news for all the wrong reasons of late, but I was heading marketing for them during their early days when things were still fairly hunky-dory, and we got some very strong results on PR. And I've just given you a small snapshot of the kind of results which we managed to, kind of coverages which we managed to get back in 2014, 2015. It was a mix of several things. We had some pure numbers-driven coverages. We had some coverages which are focused more on our growth story. We had some coverages which spoke about some business model pivots wherein we moved from structured to alternative mode of in alternative hotel accommodations wherein we tried to follow the Airbnb model. And there was also a fundraising story which we put out. There were a lot of other stories as well, which I'll touch upon as we go further along in the presentation. Moving on, what does pillar one look like if you're a brand which is a little more mature, which is, let's say, recall or top of mind recall, which is, say, knocking on top of mind, but it is certainly well past recall. Your objectives change, the nuances of your objectives change. Here it's about not about building category relevance, you've already done that. Now it's about retaining the relevance of your category. The other very important thing is on amplifying customer advocacy. This is something which is very important. In Airbnb, one of the companies which I admire, one of the brands I admire, and we'll also go through that in further detail subsequently, has done an awesome job of building and amplifying customer advocacy by putting out very strong customer testimonials, human interest stories, and so on and so forth. The other objectives which becomes very important as an organization continues to grow is to try and associate a certain aspirational character to the brand. Try and make the brand appear larger than life. Obviously, every business is trying to make money for itself and for its larger ecosystem of shareholders. But PR helps you associate a strong aspirational character to the brand, a certain depth to the brand, which a traditional advertisement cannot. The other objective which you also need to work on is about building strong brand recall. And here again, this is relevant for all of the different target stakeholders which you're talking about. And this is pretty much similar to the list of target stakeholders which we saw earlier for a company which is starting up, with one prominent addition, which is the government. And Airbnb again has been a player which has done a very good job of building very, very strong relationship bridges with the government. And that's something which you'll see subsequently. So pillar one, results again, something which I was talking about earlier. Airbnb's secret to scaling in Cuba. Even Fortune Hotels, which is one of the world's most premier hotel chains, has struggled to set up presence in Cuba. But Airbnb did a very good job of actually entering Cuba and managing its presence there. And this was through a combination of several things. They had some very strong lobbying with the government. They kept putting out some awesome stories which spoke about the build-up to Airbnb's entry into Cuba. And that was the entire story behind their success of entering into a market where American enterprises or global enterprises had struggled to enter before. And the other example, which again aligns with my point earlier about associating a certain aspirational character to your brand, was the entire One Less Stranger campaign, which started off as a social media campaign. So I'm assuming everybody here is aware of what Airbnb does. So Airbnb is in the space of homestays. So if you are an individual who has a spare bedroom, you can actually put it up on Airbnb as a homestay, and you can have people walk in and make money off it. And this is a pure transactional way of looking at their entire business model, but Airbnb decided to make it a lot more aspirational, wherein they said that every single transaction which happens, Airbnb is actually bringing the world closer by making sure there is one less stranger, because every time a guest actually meets a host, there is one less stranger in the world today. And that was a very, very successful social media campaign, and that gave them a lot of subsequent PR coverages because of the success of social media. So the mainstream media actually stood up and took notice of their successful social media campaign, and then it got picked up in mainstream media. And this is a very good example of multiple different things. It talks about the entire handshake and interplay between social media and digital PR. It talks about all of the good things of associating a certain aspirational character to your brand. So it gives you it's actually a case study of sorts from multiple different perspectives. Moving on, let's look at the second key pillar, which is about relationship building with one or probably the most important target stakeholder from a PR perspective, which is the media, and which is completely a function of the story angles which you're actually putting out. And here again, it's not a what do you call it, a one-size-fits-all kind of an approach, but you have a horses for courses kind of an approach. So for organizations which are awareness, pre-awareness organization, which is at recall, to top of mind recall, you have different kinds of possible story angles which can possibly resonate with the media. And what I've tried to do here is to give you a sense of some story angles which in all probability should work with some sustained effort. But this is obviously not the exhaustive list. So if you're a company which is at the awareness stage, brand and category introductions become very important. If as opposed to a company which is at the recall phase, wherein new product launches, business brand pivots, thought leadership becomes very important. So something which a lot of companies do very well, which are in the growth phase, is that they position their top management executives as thought leaders in the space in which they're operating in. And in a lot of cases, the media is hungry for strong, good quality content, and usually the in-house editorial team is not enough. So if you have a brand which has top management which has already been positioned as a thought leader in that space, for example, gamified learning. So the media really does not know enough about this space to be able to write intelligently and create content, intelligent quality content in this space. So if you can position let's say you are in the gamified learning space, you're having a startup which is in the gamified learning space. If you can position your top management as thought leaders in this space, the media is going to lean on you heavily for creating good quality content, and your brand also gets exposure as a result. Obviously, if you're top of mind, if you're a brand which is past recall, it's a brand which is almost synonymous with the category. A lot of the things which a brand in the recall phase does would still be relevant. In addition to that, social responsibility focused articles also become relevant. For example, there was this very awesome coverage which the Axis Bank Foundation got because of their poverty alleviation programs which they underwent in Maharashtra, and that built a lot of character and depth for the entire brand. The brand salience scores went up in 2015 in the quarter in which they got covered. Axis Bank Foundation had a lot of very strong mentions in 2015 around their entire poverty alleviation schemes in Maharashtra, and that gave them a huge uptick in terms of brand salience. Moving on, relationship building, to me, at least in the consumer tech context, There is no better example of media relationship building than the entire Airbnb Fast Company affair. So both Airbnb and Fast Company, when they began probably at similar times, and Airbnb began by putting out a lot of exclusive stories at Fast Company to begin with. And as Airbnb continued to grow, so did Fast Company. And they started putting out a lot of exclusive stories first upon Fast Company. And both these organizations continued to grow together. And that to me was a great example of media relationship building. And so to speak, Fast Company is now almost an integral part of Airbnb's brand machinery. Moving on, let's look at this entire thing about proactive PR, something I alluded to before, which I said Amazon does very well. This is a philosophy which was championed by Jeff Bezos to begin with, wherein he said you create your dream PR story first, and then you work backwards from that story and think about the nuts and bolts which need to go to make that story a reality. So there are different kinds of dream PR stories which you can work on. I've just given you a small sampling of those kinds of stories. It could be an aspirational story. It could be a story which is slightly on controversial lines because you want to grab attention. It could be a joint PR story with a larger brand or a synergistic brand. And the means for you to actually achieve these ends are multiple. You could either tap into in-house data sources or in-house stories, or you could tap into customers and put out some strong customer advocacy stories, or you could also crowdsource data from social media. And this is something which we did very well for one of the organizations I was associated with previously, wherein we crowdsourced a lot of information from the Twitterati in terms of their career aspirations for a particular year. And we packaged all of that information into a nicely prepared infographic and we presented it to the media, and that got covered. Why did that get covered? Because it gave us it gave the data a lot more credibility, because we were not just making claims based on our own internal data. This was not a finger in the sky kind of a number which we had come up with, but this was a number which we had come up with, which was publicly available, verifiable from social media, curated and presented to the media, because it's a completely verifiable, credible source of information. And that gave us a lot of good coverage, and that's a very good way for you to achieve the ends. The other way is for you to partner with a larger brand or a synergistic brand. For example, in another organization I was working for, we partnered with Twitter and we launched a co-branded course, and that gave us a lot of traction. And the entire theme around which we marketed this whole course, and the entire PR pitch was we were partnering with Twitter to create a larger ecosystem of Twitter advertising aware professionals. And that gave us a lot of PR traction. And we also partnered with Technopack, co-authored a white paper. That's how you partner with other people in your ecosystem to create compelling stories which can give you PR traction and earn media. Moving on, this is the holy triumvirate of digital PR, search, and social, something which I spoke about before. And I've given a lot of examples in terms of how this works. For example, the social media example was a case in point, wherein the Airbnb social media example is a clear one, wherein the One Less Stranger campaign started off on social. It was a hashtag that trended globally for weeks and then got picked up by mainstream media, and that gave them a lot of PR coverage. The example from one of my previous organizations, again, is a case in point, wherein we created a hashtag trending Twitter campaign about people's career aspirations for the upcoming year. And we packaged all of that information which came through. We received thousands of responses on Twitter. We packaged that response and we gave it to the media, curated it and gave it to the media, and that gave us a lot of good coverage. Obviously, good digital PR with backlinks from high domain authority websites has a lot of great spillover effects on SEO, organic search rankings over the medium to long term. Moving on, what we'll do is we'll try and understand what kind of tools a PR executive or a PR manager or anybody who's looking at PR can actually tap into. What are the most popular global tools anybody goes to from a digital PR execution perspective? So what I will do is I'll take you through some of the primary tools which are directly relevant from a PR perspective. I'll also take you through some popular tools which are indirectly relevant from a PR perspective. One of the most important tools from a PR perspective is the tool which helps you do a very good job of the entire dissemination and the end-to-end life cycle management of a PR story. This sounds like a lot of jargon. Let me try and decipher it and dumb it down for you or simplify it for you. So what we're essentially talking about here is a CRM system of sorts for a PR executive. So all of the benefits which a CRM system brings in, these kinds of tools bring in for a PR executive. It helps a PR executive actually craft the story on the platform. It helps the PR executive either upload a list of media contacts, blogger contacts which they have on their phone, or search for appropriate contacts who are there on the World Wide Web. and target specific PR stories to specific influencers, measure response after the PR story has actually been put out. So I've listed some very popular global platforms here. You have Businesswire, you've got Meltwater, you've got PR Newswire, you've got PR Web. Businesswire is obviously the world leader, and it's my personal favorite as well. Meltwater is something which is doing really well, and one of the USPs of the product is the fact that it offers you some enormously intelligent dashboards which help you gauge the efficacy of your PR outreach across different touch points, across different metrics. It helps you do a very good job of social sentiment analysis. It helps you understand what kind of impact your PR coverage has had on, say, your stock price if you're publicly listed and things like that. This slide here talks about whatever I just mentioned in action. So at PR Web, for example, the tool offers you everything. If you actually have a word editor in which you can actually craft your PR story, you can enter specific hashtags which make it SEO friendly. You can either upload contacts from your phone, as you can see over here, or you could actually choose contacts basis keywords, and you can target your push to specific people. And you can actually measure if these people have actually read your PR story. You can have time. The platform is intelligent enough to give you timely reminder saying that this person has not responded to your story. It's been a week since you sent it to them. Maybe it's time for a follow-up. So it does all of the things which is so. This is exactly like, this is as useful to a PR executive as a CRM platform is to a sales executive. Let me put it that way. Moving on, this is an example of Meltwater again. I was talking about how awesome their entire dashboard is and how they have a completely algorithmically driven dashboard which helps you measure the efficacy of your PR actions. And it also helps you measure and track what kind of media coverages you've had over time. And one very cool feature about their product, and this is something which I love, and this is something a lot of PR agencies love as well, is the fact that it actually helps you quantify and measure the kind of, or rather associate a dollar value or a rupee value to the kind of earned media coverages which your brand has got over a period of time. How do you do that? As I mentioned, earned. So you have three kinds of media, right? You have owned media, which is the media which you have, the brand exposure which you get from your own properties, which is your own website, your own blog, your own Facebook page, your own LinkedIn page, and so on. There is paid for media which you actually pay for. Let's say you run digital advertising, you do digital marketing via the Google Display Network, or you run TV ads. That's an example of paid media exposure. PR is earned media exposure. So a lot of agencies, what they do is they tell CEOs and business leaders that I've in fact saved you $100,000 worth of paid media exposure because I've driven $100,000 of earned media exposure for your brand over the last year or so. And this is done through some really awesome scientific techniques wherein they look at the number of eyeballs which are visiting a particular page, what it would have cost if you needed to get similar paid for coverage on those platforms, and then they try and reverse engineer and second guess the kind of benefits which PR has actually driven, because it's actually helped the company save money. Moving on, let's look at some of the most popular tools from a content syndication perspective. What is content syndication? First of all, let's try and understand that. It's a process by which I, as a brand, publish my content on a third-party platform. And there are several use cases why this would become relevant. Let's pick up a hypothetical one. Let's say I'm a blog. I'm a guy who started a blog, and I blog regularly on digital marketing. And I'm not a direct competitor to Digital Vidya, but there is a strong overlap of a respective target consumer demographies. People who are interested in digital marketing are going to come to me. They're also going to come to Digital Vidya. But unlike Digital Vidya, I do not sell anything online. So I am not a direct competitor of Digital Vidya. So there is a huge opportunity for Digital Vidya to actually syndicate its content on my platform. Why would I accept? Because I'm hungry for good quality content. And this is applicable in several different ways. So let's say that I'm very pally with, say, Kapil, who's one of the co-founders of Digital Vidya. I would love it if Digital Vidya were to say syndicate content on my platform. I would love it even more if Kapil were to directly syndicate content in his personal name on my platform. The other use case where this becomes relevant is I am a blog which is just about starting up. I'm very, very small. I have a monthly footfalls of, say, below 10,000, right? Below 10,000 clicks a month. And I'm hungry for good quality content to come in. In that case, I could partner, if the big brand is interested, I could partner with a big brand and get that big brand to syndicate its content on my platform. In return, I would obviously give a backlink back to the bigger brand. There are several platforms which do a very good job of helping you identify possible syndication partners. There is Arc Publishing, there is BuzzSumo, there are a lot of other good platforms. So this is a quick screenshot of how BuzzSumo works. So BuzzSumo, by the way, is also a very strong SEO backlink platform as well. We'll get to that in just a minute. So what this helps you do is you can actually search by keyword and figure out which are the most popular blogs from which I can get backlinks from. A question in a lot of people's minds is, I can get the same information of Google search. Why do I need these kinds of platforms? The answer is very simple. These kinds of platforms bring about a lot of structure and a scientific methodology to the entire life cycle of content syndication. Obviously, if it's one or two content syndication partners you're working with, a Google search and an offline mechanism of tracking this entire initiative could work. But if you want to do this at scale, you need a platform, and that's where players like BuzzSumo come in. You can actually figure out who are the influencers, who are your blog partners with whom you can partner and syndicate your content in. Moving on further, let's look at SEO link building. So SEO link building is something which is very similar to content syndication, but there is a slight nuanceical difference. SEO link building is done at scale. Content syndication is not. SEO link building typically happens with blogs which are really, really small. Content syndication happens with blogs which are at least have a certain level of critical mass in terms of following. And SEO link building is typically done by the SEO team, managed by the SEO team in an organization. It's not necessarily managed by the PR team, which is why I've put this down as a separate entity, so to speak. But in terms of philosophy, it's essentially the same thing. What you're looking to do is to get your content and your brand spoken about in a third-party property where there is a strong overlap of consumer demography and there is this overlap in the overall consumer universe you're talking to, and you want to get a backlink in the process so that you can push the envelope on organic rankings over a period of time. And there are several platforms which do a very good job of identifying who your SEO link partners could be. My personal favorite is Majestic. It's an awesome product. There are other platforms as well. There is BuzzStream, there is Moz, there is Raven Tools, and Solo SEO. Solo SEO is an awesome tool for beginners. That's something which I've noticed. Majestic, again, this is what it does, right? So for example, any given URL, it helps you understand what the URL's domain authority and page authority are. So both of these are numbers on a scale of 0 to 100. And this is a number which is given by Google, which helps anybody understand how credible or otherwise that particular website is in the category in which the company operates in. There are also a couple of other patented matrices which Majestic has introduced. One is called as trust flow and the second is citation flow. Citation flow, it sounds like a lot of jargon, but it's fairly simple. Citation flow, in a sense, if I am a blog and I have got, say, 20 backlinks, and there is another blog which has got 400 backlinks, the second blog would have a higher citation flow score than mine because they've got more number of backlinks. So it's purely based on number of backlinks. Trust flow is based on the credibility of the sources from which you've got backlinks from. So it's not based on quantity, but it's based on quality. So quite often, it can quite often happen that a trust flow is very high for an organization. If the trust flow is very high for an organization, the citation flow could be high. If I were to make a call on a possible content syndication partner or a backlink partner, I would obviously choose a player who has a very strong trust score. The citation score is typically used as a tiebreaker. But if there is a player with a very high citation score but with a very low trust score, it means the guy has got a lot of backlinks from questionable sources, which is why their trust flow is very low. Moving on, the other aspect of, or the last piece of the entire jigsaw puzzle of digital PR is the entire piece of native content discovery. A lot of people could argue that this is not really related to digital PR, but in my opinion, it is in a slightly indirect fashion, and I'll actually elaborate on why that is the case. First of all, let's try and understand what do we mean by native content discovery. So native content discovery is a means of you actually putting out an advertisement on a particular blog or a publisher, which masquerades as native editorial content. So for example, let me just show you a screenshot. So the ads which you see here inside the blue circle, these are actually advertisements. The ads which you see on your TOI homepage, those are a lot of the links which you see on your TOI homepage, clickbaity links. They're actually advertisements masquerading as native editorial content. So to the less than discerning eye, this actually appears as editorial content. So people do trust it a lot more and tend to click on it a lot more. So they perform a lot better than traditional advertisements would. For example, these ads here would get a lot more CTR than the ads which you see at the top because they look directly like ads. Nobody's going to click on it. but these look like interesting editorial content, so people would be forced to, or people would be interested in clicking on it. There are a couple of different platforms which are world leaders when it comes to native content discovery. So that's why it's called native content, because it almost looks native to the content, to the editorial content already there on the publisher's page. Outbrain and Taboola, these are the two biggest platforms in the world when it comes to, these are native content ad platforms, so to speak. So what they do is they have a whole bunch of inventory from publishers on which they run native ads on. So on the one side, they manage publishers, and on the other side, they manage advertisers. They manage the advertisers' needs with the kind of targeting options which are available at their disposal. There is also the Columbia Traffic Network, which is available, which is Times Group's, our very own Times Group's in-house native ad platform. So all of the TOI ads, which you see, the clickbaity ads, they are powered by the Columbia Ad Traffic Network. This gives you a lot of benefits. Obviously, from a customer perspective, it gives you benefits because it does wonders to credibility, because customers think that these are editorial content pieces and they click on it. It also has certain other benefits. For example, one of the organizations I worked for earlier, we had a lot of difficulty in getting covered by NDTV, because the editorial team at NDTV was fairly skeptical of the kind of resonance a story which covered us would actually have with their target audiences. So we actually ran ads via Taboola on their homepage, and that gave us a lot of good results. The CTRs were above 2%. We then went back to the editorial team and said that your audience really loves our brand because these are the kind of click-through rates which you got. And we did some paid advertising on your homepage, and that gave us some organic coverage downstream. So those are some secondary benefits which you can get if you do a good job of native content discovery. Moving on, let's try and understand how Airbnb, which is one of the world's, in my opinion at least, one of the world's, in my opinion, it's an aspirational North Star or a benchmark when it comes to doing PR and branding really well. Let's look at how they've done PR really well. Before we even get in, let's try and understand the context here. Airbnb's target customer is obviously a value for money, adventure-seeking tourist. And in terms of their business brand objectives, a lot of these things are fairly intuitive. They wanted to establish awareness. They wanted to establish awareness not just for themselves, but for homestays as a category. But some of their biggest objectives were around addressing safety and trust concern. They wanted to break down a lot of these inertia points, which were actually preventing the growth for their business. And safety and trust, both from a host and from a guest perspective, were rampant. Safety and trust concerns were rampant. The other problem was regulatory barriers. So which is why they needed a lot of friends in the government. And something which they did really well was linking Airbnb to popular culture of sharing and bringing the world together. Their PR strategy, it had a lot of very good elements. I'm just picking up the most important elements in their entire PR strategy. They had relationship building with specific targeted media properties. The Fast Company is a huge example. They had a lot of friends in the government. The entire story, which the entire backroom dealings and the work which went into their entire launch in Cuba is a case in point. They had some very, very strong customer advocacy or human interest stories, which they actually put out in the media. For example, they got some very good coverage when they had the story of how a single mother was able to support the education of her kids because she actually became a host on the Airbnb platform. Likewise, there was a story about a physically handicapped man who was able to fund surgery for himself because he was a host on the Airbnb platform, and he earned upwards of $40,000-$50,000 over 12 months. Again, there was this huge handshake which they had with social media. The One Stranger List campaign was a case in point. Belong Anywhere, which has now become their brand tagline, was another case in point. And the results are there for everybody to see. I think by 2018, they anticipate Airbnb to be catering to anywhere from 6 to 10% of all of the hotels demand in US and Europe. And that is a huge number. They've obviously, the results both from a market share perspective and from a mind share perspective have been enormous. And that to me is their single biggest victory. They've been able to influence consumer perception in a positive fashion, despite all of the concerns around trust, despite the negative publicity which they've got, despite the odd the odd bad incident which has happened when it's come to either a host misbehaving with a guest or vice versa, or a guest vandalizing a home. They've managed to have a lot of positive press, and which is why consumer perception has been influenced fairly positively, and that to me is the single biggest victory of their entire PR machinery. To me, some of the key takeaways are you've got to try and focus on a theme which is larger than your brand story, and focus media on that larger theme which you're working towards. and reiterate the connect between your brand and that larger theme. And social media to me is a great tool in this day and age for trying to influence brand perception, for trying to drive results from a PR perspective. Friends in media are very critical, but the friends in the government are even more critical. The Airbnb example proves that. That's pretty much what I had. We'll open the bridge for any questions that you people might have. I hope the session was useful. Divya?
Thank you so much, Veda. Everyone, you can put in your questions in the question panel. And in the meantime, I'm also launching out a poll for people who are interested in digital marketing course. So we are waiting for people to put in their questions and also select the poll. So we haven't received any question yet. And so you guys could hear the presentation now. That's also a question because there's no input in the questions panel, nor did we receive any questions. So there's one question which is about the tools which you shared with us. So are these portals free or do a user have to pay to get themselves registered?
Could you repeat the question, Divya?
The portals which you say shared, Outbrain and others. So a person needs to pay to get the business registered over there, or how does the business model work?
So Outbrain and Taboola are pure platform platforms. So it is essentially paid media. It's an ad network. The only difference is its niche is native ads. So it's no different than say advertising on the Google Display Network or advertising on Facebook. And a lot of these ads run on a CPC or a CPM basis. So there it is completely paid for. A lot of the other platforms I spoke to you about have a classic freemium play, wherein they have a pilot access which is available for 30 days, which is completely free, and then you've got to pay for it from that point on.
Sure. Thank you so much. So the people who joined in late or missed the session in between, we'll share out the recording with you by Tuesday along with the presentation. So you need not worry about missing the session. So there's another question by Dhruvi which says, Indian media is so focused on one-to-one relationships. Is it difficult to actually maintain and build this if you are not a big PR agency? How can a person really solve this?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And one of the other problems is also the fact that 2017 is not 2014 or 2015 anymore. So there is a lot of skepticism, especially if you're a company which is starting up. There is a lot of skepticism around startups. I remember the time back at Stage 11, and it used to be very easy for us to get PR traction because there was this huge buzz around the entire ecosystem of startups. All we had to do was put out a nicely prepared infographic and it would get covered. But now it's no longer the case. So it requires a lot of persistence of effort. And I think the important thing is you need to work on building a strong relationship with the media. So you shouldn't be looking to sell a story every time we talk to media, but you should be looking to add value to their lives. So you've got to put yourself in their shoes, be empathetic, think about what is it that the media is actually looking for. So if there is a way for you to help solve their problems, then you build a strong relationship with the media, which you can then farm over a period of time. So let me give you an example, right? So at Playablo again, this is a completely unknown brand. It's bootstrapped, it's angel funded. So it's 2017 again, and there is so much fatigue around startups that people just don't want to cover you. So what we did then was we said, if there are interesting stories you're working on from an edtech perspective, we'll help author those stories. You just give us credits. So we almost acted like their extended editorial team, so to speak. So that's a good way for you to begin. So if you're an Amazon, there's nothing you need to do. If you're a Tesla, your CEO is all of the PR you need. Elon Musk is all of the PR you need. But if you're not, and if you're a company which is starting up and in India, then you've got to look at creative ways such as these for you to add value in the journalist's life. I think that's one way for you to crack this entire puzzle.
Thank you so much. Next question is by Balakrishna. He wants to know how can an amusement park think about doing PR?
That's very interesting. So again, there are several ways in which you can go about doing it. One thing which could work is, obviously there are several intuitive ways in which you can think about doing PR for an amusement park. One, one way in which you could go about doing it, and which again aligns with the point which I was talking about earlier of trying and associating a certain aspirational character and an aspirational value to your business or a brand. That comes into play here. So if the amusement park can actually build a case which talks about, say you're running an amusement park, which is called ABC, which is based in say Coimbatore. If you can actually, if there is a way for you to actually quantifiably show that there is an improvement in the feel good factor or the happiness index of customers between the time, because of the time they actually spend in the amusement park. So you actually capture some indices from the customer when they walk in, and you capture some indices, the same indices for the customer when they actually walk out. All of these indices actually point to the levels of happiness or the levels of the warm fuzzy feeling they have within themselves before and after. And if you can actually package all of this and present it in an interesting fashion, that could be a pretty interesting thing. Nobody's actually done that. If people talk about amusement parks because of the functional benefits it brings in. But if you can actually talk about the kind of elevation and happiness it brings in, and if you can actually quantify that and present it in a scientific fashion, that could be an interesting story angle for you to pursue.
Thank you. Next question is about how can a person register himself or the
Yeah, you
business?
can do it on the website directly. You can just go to the website and you can do it. And as I told you earlier, it's a freemium play. It's free of cost for a certain period of time, after which you've got to pay for it.
Okay. So Shruti wants to know what would be the digital PR mechanism for an organization who is there in the market but has recently entered the digital marketing domain.
I think the first thing is to go back. I mean, you would it would if you could just go back to the 4 pillars which I spoke about. That's a structured way of actually looking at things. You think about what is it that you have to offer, which is different. You then list down all of your objectives, your PR objectives. You start from your business objectives first, then list down all your PR objectives. Try and map those into your target stakeholders. In this case, the target stakeholders can't be generic, but you actually need to prepare a list of all influencers, all people in the media to whom you can actually position this to. And then you try and work on crafting your dream stories to begin with, and then you work backwards from there and figure out what kind of support systems you need to support those dream stories. For example, maybe there is a story about, if you want to say, build on a story of why, I'm assuming you're a traditional marketing agency which is now getting into digital marketing. That's what I understand from the question. Maybe there is a story which you can build on how, if an organization has if an agency has a very strong grounding and a background in traditional marketing, and then where to spread its wings into digital marketing, it would understand the qualitative aspects of marketing a lot better. And here's why. Maybe that is a story in which you could work on. And you conduct a poll with a lot of your customers, and you back up your story with data, which has come in from the survey which you conduct. That could be a story angle for you to pursue. But the important thing is for you to do this in a structured manner. You work on your objectives, map it to specific target stakeholders, and then list out your dream stories. And then you work backwards from there and figure out what kind of support systems you need for achieving those stories. And again, something which I missed mentioning earlier, typically design teams and content teams in any organization are very busy catering to the needs of the marketing function, catering to the needs of the category or merchandising function, catering to the needs of the sales or product functions. Very rarely do you see the PR function actually putting pressure on design and content teams. And that's something which I would urge everybody to focus on. The PR guide really needs to be behind design and content teams to create a strong enough pipeline. First of all, a PR content calendar needs to be created, and there is a healthy tension which needs to be maintained between the PR person and the design and content teams to make sure that that content calendar is being fulfilled. Let's say the PR person needs to talk about, say, give me content for this authored article, give me this really cool infographic which can paint a very strong picture about this category, because this is what the media is looking for. So the design and the content teams, at least 30% of the bandwidth needs to be focused on, at least in organizations which are starting up, needs to be focused on fulfilling the PR guys asks in terms of content.
Got it. Thank you so much. Rajesh wants to know, in your view, how much a company pays importance to traditional or digital media.
Sorry, what was the question again?
What's the level of importance does a company pays to traditional versus digital media?
That is horses for courses, right? It depends completely on the space you operate in. Let's say you're a bank which is starting up, Equitas Bank, right, which is just started up. The level of importance in India, we live in a country where culturally we still we still trust players who have a very strong physical presence a lot more than people who purely are available on digital. So you need to have very strong ATL campaigns. You need to have strong brand activation programs. So traditional media is very important in that context. If you are a company which is just about starting up, which is bootstrapped, you're short on cash, obviously digital marketing is very important. Inbound marketing becomes very important because you can measure results. You can run campaigns basis your budget. In traditional marketing, typically there is a certain minimum viable budget which you need to have for you to see success, right? If you want, even if you want to run a radio campaign, you need to have a certain minimum budget available for you to even do justice to the campaign. That's not the case when it comes to digital marketing. Basis whatever means you have at your disposal, you can actually run campaigns, measure results, target accurately, make changes in real time. So it depends on the context completely. So if you are in the tech space, if you're in the digital space, if you're bootstrap, digital media certainly. But obviously in a different context, different kinds of, in other contexts, the banking context is a case in point, traditional media becomes relevant.
Got it. Thank you so much. Bhavna wants to know
Sure.
how would a person or an author can highlight the results of outcome of his writing in a circle. For example, the person is a ECO of some of the firm.
No, I didn't follow the question. So which is the question? Can I highlight the outcome of writing on Outbrain within a circle? So Outbrain is not a writing platform. So let's say that so I'm assuming the question, if I understand it correctly, is let's say that there is this awesome piece of content which has been created by an organization, and the organization wants to measure what kind of results that content piece is actually driving. There are several ways to measure. One is obviously you put in a lead capture form on that page, and you try and see if people are actually filling up. For example, this webinar right here is an example of content marketing by Digital Vidya. So the number of leads which actually come in from this particular webinar directly indicates how efficacious this particular piece of content really is. Right? The same applies for a blog piece or a content piece which you might create, right? So the number of leads which you generate are a direct indication. The second is if you would obviously be promoting that content across social media, the kind of earned media it creates, the number of shares it creates is again a very strong indicator of the quality of the content. If enough people are actually sharing the content, it means that the content quality is really good. And it's again creating earned media for you as a brand, something which you're not paying for. Outbrain, by the way, is not a writing platform, something which I was mentioning earlier. That is a native content discovery platform. It's an ad network, pure and simple, focused on native ads.
Got it. Shilpi wants to know what's the best possible communication for small towns and villages.
Let me just pull up what is the best possible digital communication. Okay. So this is something, okay, this is not directly related to PR, but from a digital marketing perspective, one very effective channel which I found out, which is very unglamorous. A lot of people don't like to be seen publicly for exposing this particular channel is SMS marketing. To me, a lot of people say it does very bad things for your brand, it is spammy, etc., etc. But given the cost of actually sending an SMS to a particular person versus the returns, in terms of pure numbers, if you were to remove the entire qualitative aspect of negative brand rub-off, if you had to look at just numbers from that cold lens, SMS is in fact, SMS marketing is one of the most cost-effective marketing channels that I have come across. And in India, we live in a country where everybody's personal information is available at one paise. And there are so many agencies from which you can buy numbers from. And that's something which really works well. So purely from a numbers perspective, if you were to compare, so even if your hit rate is 1 in 10,000, the numbers still add up. And that's especially if you're talking about smaller towns and villages where the internet penetrations are low, SMS marketing would be a very good channel for you to reach out into the hinterlands.
Thank you so much. Another question is by Pranavas. He wants to know, one of the challenges for is identifying the right kind of social media influencers and building profitable, equitable relationships. How can a person manage it?
Yeah, it's not easy. One way in which you can do it is you identify the right influencer. I mean, that's to me, identifying the right influencer is not the difficult part. The difficult part is in actually building a strong relationship, sustaining it, and farming it. And those are the difficult pieces. How do you do that? There are several ways in which you can do it. One, my personal favorite way is in the beginning of the relationship, it's very similar to dating a girl. that in the beginning of the relationship, you try and make sure that you bring a lot of value to the entire relationship, right? You make sure that you put out, you do a lot of, if let's say the influencer is regularly putting out a lot of good content, you make sure there is a brand, you're sharing that person's content on your platform. So there is a lot of give before you even think about actually asking the influencer to share some of the quality content which you put out. And over a period of time, once a relationship reaches a certain level of maturity, you then try and ask the influencer to share some of the good quality content which you put out, and so on and so forth. But in a lot of cases, there is a certain financial arrangement which is also set up. For example, for one of the organizations I worked for earlier, for a lot of the courses which we launched, we typically had a course ambassador. There was a financial arrangement with the course ambassador to actually do some kind of social media amplification of the courses and the contents and the upcoming webinars and so on and so forth on their social media platforms. But in most cases, it's a long drawn process. If there is no money exchanging hands, it's a long drawn process, and it needs to be a two-way street. You can't just expect the influencer to keep sharing and socially amplifying your content if you're not doing anything for the influencer. So you need to be able to, you need to share some of the content which that guy puts out as well in return, and that's how the relationship gains maturity and depth.
Great. We are done with the questions. Thank you so much, Veda, for leading the session and answering the questions we had. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining in. We'll see you in the next webinar and have a great weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone. Have a great weekend. You were a wonderful audience. Bye. Hope you enjoyed it.